Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I'll just get a show of hands if you've heard any of the following expressions. Attitude determines altitude. Yeah, it's a little bit. Okay, a couple. How about life is what you make it? Okay, last but not least, mind over matter. Excellent. So the words vary, but the idea is always the same. Perspective shapes reality. Change your perspective, and the things you perceive should change accordingly. This is a favorite point of motivational speakers and spiritual teachers, a central theme of the self-help genre, and a fixture of popular culture. It's perennial. In every age and culture, we find this very same message. For example, the Roman philosopher Epictetus taught his students that people are disturbed not by things and events, but by the opinions they form about things and events. The Buddha said, all that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. And if ancient philosophers and sages are a little bit too out there for you, take the words of this well-respected psychologist. He says, events in the world affect us only through our interpretation of them. So if we can control our interpretation, we can control our world. Easy, right? Now, despite its prevalence, I always regarded this idea with a heavy dose of skepticism. The mind is nice and all, but matter is concrete, and it doesn't change by thinking alone. There's a whole lot of doing involved. Therefore, matter trumps mind. Case closed. That's what I believed, right up until the spring of 2013, when I had an experience that forced me to reconsider this opinion. Here's what happened. Sitting at the office, at my desk, buried in mindless work, when I start feeling funny, I'm contemplating something that is definitely not work-related. Though looking back on it now, I couldn't tell you what it was. In any case, one thought led to another, and I had a sudden breakthrough. Everything became so clear, so simple. And in that moment, my entire world changed. But here's the really weird part. Nothing actually changed. My material circumstances were the same as before. Financially, professionally, and personally, my life was identical. It was how I felt about my life that was very different. Over the next few days, I noticed that the routine and mundane aspects of everyday living no longer bored me to tears. Things like loading the dishwasher or vacuuming my perpetually messy house brought me gratitude and satisfaction, of all things. Little details that had previously escaped my notice, simple things like trees or birdsong, stepped into the foreground, filled me with awe and reverence, and I questioned how I had gone so long without noticing these things. As this went on, I started trying to put my quote-unquote cubicle epiphany into words, but to my shock, I was unable to do so. How strange. On the one hand, I felt I'd learned something of great value, something clear, simple, and life-altering. But on the other hand, I couldn't verbalize any of it. Looking back on it now, I think it's because I didn't actually learn anything new at all. It's more like I saw what I already knew from a different perspective. Now, there's an old Chinese proverb that echoes this experience. It goes, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change too. Which to me sounds a whole lot like mind over matter. So after my cubicle epiphany, I felt there was more to this notion than I had previously believed, which begged the question, what else had I been wrong about? What other ideas had I written off prematurely? More importantly, how many other misconceptions had I been taking for granted? So I set aside everything I thought I knew, and I started asking questions. Really simple questions. Like, for instance, what is happiness? What is truth? What is good? And the scariest question of all, who am I? Over the past 4 years, this process has yielded a number of insights, many of which forced me to reconsider and abandon old notions about myself, others, and the world at large. Today, I'd like to share a few of these insights with you and talk about how they impacted my life. The first I'd like to share is about that scary question I just mentioned. Who am I? See, early on in my journey of exploration, I was forced to acknowledge something which had always floated on the edge of my awareness. A persistent feeling that I didn't fit in, that I'm an outcast or a misfit. I can trace this feeling all the way back to elementary school. I didn't belong to any group or club. I wasn't academically gifted enough to be a nerd or athletically gifted enough to be a jock or rebellious enough to be a bad boy. I was a little bit of everything, and as a result, I never felt like anything. I had no identity to cling to, no label or thing to call my own. During my teenage years, the desire to fit in intensified. I think that's pretty common. I was tired of looking in from the outside, so I tried to suppress and hide aspects of my personality that I assumed prevented me from joining everybody else on the inside. I ditched loyal friends, gave up favorite hobbies, changed the way I dressed and behaved. I totally sold out. But despite my efforts, acceptance and peer recognition eluded me to the bitter end. So when I graduated high school, it's not surprising that I felt a deep dislike for the person I had become. Proceeded to do what any rational person would do at this point. I spent the next 10 years trying to find myself, whatever that means. I went to university, worked in retail and construction, met and married my wife, had my first child. And still, throughout all of this, I had not succeeded in finding myself. Shortly after my daughter was born, I made a change, leaving the construction industry and taking a desk job. And it was here that I had what I like to call my cubicle epiphany, and saw for the first time how foolish I am. First, I spent years trying to be something I wasn't. Then, when I didn't like what I had become, I spent more years looking for myself in all the wrong places. All along, I should have been trying to be myself. I should have been looking within, not out there. After these realizations, I promised to never again betray myself. I made a commitment to embrace who and what I am without shame, embarrassment, or regard for the consequences. So here it is, as a matter of public record, in case I ever forget. I am an outsider. Always have been, always will be. The desire to fit in and be accepted vanished the moment I acknowledged this fact about myself. Today I realize that there is one person above all, whose respect, admiration, and approval I should seek, whose loyalty I should never betray, and whose opinion of me I should take very seriously. That person is me. One of my most beloved spiritual guides, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than we love others, yet we care more about the opinions of others than we do about our own." I'm not saying that I disregard what loved ones, friends, and colleagues think of me. I'm only saying that I place more value on what I think of me. After all, what good is it to be admired by others if I loathe myself? It seems obvious now. So why did it take me so long to figure this out? And how did I get my priorities backwards in the first place? How did I come to value image and reputation over character and integrity? And where do values come from in the first place? Why do we sometimes feel pressure to betray those values? These questions intrigued me, so I started looking for answers. I figured the more I understand this process, the better prepared I will be to resist the pressure, should it mount once again. Because that's what it feels like, doesn't it? Pressure to be like this, to succeed at that, to fit in here, vacation there, please these people, prove myself better than those people, and so on. So where does this pressure come from? Now, obviously I have a few theories, or else I wouldn't be up here chatting with you today. Theory number one is that the pressure comes from our culture. Listen carefully. Cult. Sure. This little pun is no coincidence. More like a linguistic Freudian slip. Indoctrination. Rigid adherence to rules, traditions, taboos. Two-tiered system where different rules apply to leadership. Shunning those who refuse to play along. These are the hallmarks of a cult. And I'm sure that with a little bit of effort and imagination, you can see how culture works in nearly the same way. In school, I was taught what to think, not how to think. By the time I graduated, my head was already filled with questionable information. My definitions of key concepts, such as goodness, truth, beauty, and success, had already been decided for me before I could ever decide for myself. And for years, I never thought to question any of it. I simply went on assuming that these were the correct definitions, and I tried to make the best of it. No teacher, parent, or peer ever encouraged me to form my own opinion on these topics or to define my own terms. And though throughout my youth, people made a great big deal about the importance of individuality, I feel that such talk was little more than lip service. When it came down to life in the real world, conformity was always encouraged as the number one choice. Which is kind of ironic, because history's most iconic and influential role models are all non-conformists, rebels, revolutionaries. Think about Gandhi, Socrates, Jesus, Martin Luther, Malcolm X. The list goes on and on. There's something about these individuals that appeals to us on a deeper level, that inspires our respect centuries after they have moved on. And no wonder. Whatever we may think of their respective beliefs, causes, and methods, we can't help but admire their ability to resist the pressure, to live and act freely according to their convictions, as if without obstruction. My question is, how did they do it? How did they resist the pressure to follow age-old traditions indiscriminately? And furthermore, how can I be like them? Did they discover some secret superpower that made them impervious to public ridicule, poverty, and the threat of physical violence? And if so, what is this power? Because I want a piece of it. Ernesto Che Guevara once said that the true revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love. Is love the power that frees us from culture's grip? Maybe. But lately I've been toying with a slightly different theory. Theory number 2. Lately I've been thinking that maybe these rebels and revolutionaries didn't resist the pressure at all. Maybe they realized there is no pressure, save the pressure we apply to ourselves. Maybe they understood that the only power culture has over us is the power we lend it. Reputation, fame, public opinion, material possessions, maybe we give these things power over us. by imbuing them with undue importance. So here's the last thing I want to share with you. It's not a fact. It's not truth with a capital T. Just my opinion, based on a little bit of personal experience. The power to resist pressure, whether it comes from peers or institutions, the power to define ourselves and our world in a deliberate and mindful manner, the power to be who we truly are and to work toward becoming our best selves is not only real, but available to each of us right now. And this power is so great that even the threat of punishment is impotent in its presence. Just think of all those names I just listed for you. When given a chance to confess to crimes he never committed and live out the rest of his days in peace, Socrates said, "Bring on the hemlock." He chose poison over self-betrayal. Presented with a similar choice, Jesus chose the cross. We have been led to believe that these were remarkable individuals, geniuses, prodigies, and miracle workers. But guess what? That's just more misinformation. They were human, same as us. Not idols to be worshipped, but examples to be followed. Their power is our power. It resides in us as well. As I see it, this is the essential message of every sage, philosopher, and mystic of the last 4,000 years. Don't look out there. Look in here. Or as the poet Rumi said, everything you want, you already are. Not you already have it. You're it. How empowering is that? In every age, there are people who are compelled to deliver this message to those with ears to listen. Do you guys hear it, ladies and gentlemen? It's very faint these days, isn't it? It's being drowned out by all the other conflicting messages of our age. So in closing, allow me to share with you just one more time in my own imperfect words, so that when you leave here today, it will be fresh in your mind. And here it is, in 25 words, perfect for Twitter. Your Savior is near. Salvation is closer than you think. Look in the mirror. There's your Savior. Now look within. There's your salvation. Thank you.